Those who aren't afraid to delve into the most outrageous and prohibited aspects of human nature have a fearless attitude for not shying away from certain themes and subjects. However, the question is, can a lack of variety and repetition make what is considered severe less taboo? Hi and welcome back to If Looks Could Kill. Today we will be discussing Nymphomaniac Volumes 1 and 2 from 2013. Nymphomaniac was directed by Lars von Trier and stars many of his recurring actors such as Stellan Skarsgård, Charlotte Gainsbourg and Willem Dafoe, as well as a round of newcomers including Christian Slater, Stacey Martin and Shia LaBeouf. This film concludes Lars von Trier's Depression trilogy, which began with Antichrist, which we've already discussed on this channel, and Melancholia. Nymphomaniac was initially conceived as one feature, but was split into two parts when the final product ended up being 4 hours in its entirety. Also, side note that the version I will be referring to in this video is the uncensored director's cut. I haven't seen the more common versions of Nymphomaniac, but from what I gather it's a lot less graphic and cuts out most explicit close-up shots of penetration amongst other things. Moving on to the actual plot of Nymphomaniac, the narrative, which is more simplistic than you might be led to believe, focuses on a girl named Jo who's shown to be badly beaten up, is taken in one night by a man named Seligman, who she recounts her life's experience dealing with nymphomania. Her story is told through flashbacks of her being a young child into her adult years. We cut back and forth between the life story of Jo and the conversation between her and Seligman in present day. The flashback scenes show us how tragic Jo's life became, and we learn about her warped mindset and experiences that shaped her. My favourite performance in this film is Stacey Martin, who plays the young version of Jo. She delivers an extremely intriguing performance of this young woman with a very sinister tone to herself. Shia LaBeouf plays Jerome, who is one of Jo's conquests who reoccurs sporadically throughout the film. His performance is decent, but his attempted Cockney accent is quite distracting because of his half-heartedness, and also we're just used to hearing him talk with his normal American accent anyway. The structure works very well with the storytelling format as we see the journey of this woman and her life. The character Seligman, played by Stellan Skarsgård, constantly references his scholarly knowledge of history and religion with little anecdotes that relate to Jo's story. At first I didn't understand the point of this, but now I get that it reinforces the idea that Seligman's character is more interested in intelligence rather than the titillating details of Jo's story, which a lot of men would have focused on. The communication between Jo and Seligman in present day is extremely interesting because of how they compare perspectives and opinions and common debates around human nature. The choice of the character Seligman being a self-confessed asexual puts the characters at ease to discuss the accounts of sex openly and freely and get into details without any feeling of being aroused from either parties. Something that I was not expecting from this film is the humour that seeps through at certain moments, which adds an unexpected layer that removes some of the dullness and depressive feel. The scene with the cameo by Uma Thurman where she plays a mother who's cheated on by her spouse is an unexpected moment of dark humour and also shows the consequential reality of Jo's actions. You can also see the amount of fun that Uma Thurman is having in the part, which just makes it all the more entertaining. I think the best way to experience this film is to view the two cuts back to back, because this was obviously how it was initially conceived. Lars von Trier generally can't help himself when it comes to runtimes and excessive scenes. Other films he has made have been called unnecessarily long, which is why he may have made the decision to cut this into two parts. I do think that the film could exist as one volume instead of two, because I find that a lot of the content is just there for the sake of it, such as a good chunk at the start of volume 2 that I don't really see the point of. On one hand, I admire Lars von Trier for recognizing that people may simply not be on board for a 4-hour film and releasing it as two for people to digest easier. The very risque topics in this film are handled head on and don't make light of why they are controversial, but the way in which certain points are made do not sit well with me. For example, at one point Jo discusses a time in which she had a man restrained against his will in her possession, and she taunts him with stories to find out what turns him on sexually and discovers that he's a pedophile. Jo, however, takes pity on him and praises him for being aware of his sickening fantasies and never acting on his urges, and she decides to commend this man by performing oral sex on him. This perspective obviously made me have issues with the film's morals, but one could argue that this is the point, and one could say this is to display how the psychology of Jo works and her off-kilter philosophy about human nature. Another scene that is probably most memorable for viewers is the sequence that involves a self-inflicted abortion in Volume 2. In the version I saw, at least, the director's cut, it's clear that Lars wanted us to see everything imaginable and highlight the nightmarish reality of certain aspects of femininity. This film literally leaves nothing up to the imagination by showing overtly filmed external shots of the procedure, as well as showing an X-ray scan of the act itself, so they could nearly not have possibly succeeded anymore to show everything possible. Right after this scene, Seligman discussed how a man could never understand this kind of experience, or even be entitled to have his say on this part of womanhood whatsoever. Then something very bizarre happens when he compares the kind of mental repression that comes with abortion to the meat industry and how people block out the way in which animals are slaughtered. I think this is a fair point, but the character simply just verbalizes it to the audience, and it's like, oh hey, this is how it is and this is how you should read it. Perhaps if the character said something that alluded to this idea with visual shots from slaughterhouse films, it would have been more engaging for viewers. Charlotte Gainsbourg is brilliant once again in this film and works very naturally with Lars von Trier's style. However, one might argue that her presence is tiresome, especially if you watch the 3 films in the Depression trilogy in order, as she plays one of the main characters in all 3. Not that the actress is incapable and undoubtedly extremely talented and courageous, but seeing the same actor play 3 similar roles in a row can potentially make the audience stop investing as much emotion. In comparison with the other 2 accompanying films, Antichrist and Melancholia, this film would probably be the least admirable out of all 3, since it didn't quite pack the same punch as Antichrist, and Melancholia had quite a subtle majestic quality that made it stand out and have a sense of relatability. Not to say that Nymphomaniac is without quality, but there is a lot to say about its take on the idea of humanity and the narrative of this fleshed out character's journey. I probably should have said this earlier, but if it's not obvious already, there is obviously a lot of sex scenes in this film from the very start of Volume 1 to the end of Volume 2. The problem with this is that Lars von Trier obviously enjoys embracing the taboo but integral parts of the human species, but his ideas can get overshadowed if the viewer becomes numb to certain visuals and does not perceive layers that the film has. On one hand, I wish I had seen the censored version of Nymphomaniac in case the ideas are more cohesive in that, but I thought the director's cut would have more clarity. In my opinion, without spoiling it, the ending of the film doesn't do the film justice, especially because of the runtime length. I also really enjoyed the performance by Mia Goth, who makes an appearance in Volume 2. She has made quite a name for herself recently, with appearing in films like A Cure for Wellness and X. I think this film would have a better reputation if it was more differentiated from Lars' previous work, since it came so close behind the others and you can't really help but compare them to each other. My final thoughts on this film is that on one hand there might be a touch of it devaluing shocking imagery, but on the other it tells a story of a woman dealing with real issues in a discursive and open way. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my thoughts on Nymphomaniac. Please subscribe and tune in for more videos like this coming very shortly.